With that, I want to thank you both for serving. It's a very, very hard job. Lots and lots and lots of things that have to be fixed. I'm really appreciative of how much time I can tell by my interviews you have spent, and particularly Commissioner Picker. I really, really appreciate, don't always agree with your opinions, but I totally appreciate your ideas, the things how well prepared you came to my office about models and things that could be done, and how much care you took on the details of implementation. So I think if we can move to a stronger transparency, that would help us all. Thank you.
Thank you all for your no, perfectly fine. Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chair. Mr. Cannella.
Mr. Pro Tem, I've already met with both the commissioners and asked questions, and just in the interest of time, I won't repeat those questions. So I'll just make a brief statement. What you do has an effect on a lot of folks in California, whether it's pipe safety, whether it's the cost of services. And I want you to remember that although we have this attitude in California, we want to change the world and we want the world to follow our lead, there's a great cost to that. And Commissioner Randolph, you mentioned in your interview that climate change was the #1 reason you wanted to be on the PUC, which is a little concerning to me, because although that's very important, so are, the pipeline safety. So there's so many things that are tangible that we've got to deal with right now. Climate change is such a huge thing that hopefully that doesn't obstruct everything else that's very important and very necessary to deal with right now. But even that, to set a goal to California to combat climate change, there's a great cost to that. And remember, there's a lot of folks in California that barely get by right now, and they pay very high prices for electricity. And when we're trying to change the world, let's please keep those folks that are very much struggling right now in mind when we set those policies. So thank you.
You really know how to hurt my feelings, Mr. Cannella.
You're a legislator. It's different.
With that, let's go with Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pro Tem. Thank you for the opportunity to have met, and many of my questions were similar to my colleagues. I think the one challenge we have was just the way these hearings are often structured. We hear from you, then we'll hear from the public, and sometimes, depending upon time or the pleasure of the chair, will allow you to respond. So I just wanted to use my time talking a little bit about and raising the issues and giving you on the front end an opportunity to respond to some of the very late received, which is a problem for me, letters of concern and opposition. And it's a problem because, I spent most of my career before becoming elected being an advocate. And so I understand your role as an advocate, and you don't empower the legislators with the information that's of concern to your organization or the community that you're advocating on behalf of. If we received the letter on August 19th, is today the 19th? August 19th, that would be today. That's a problem for a very critical commission, very critical appointees that make major decisions that impact, as Senator Cannella said, every aspect of every Californian's life. As I recall, they were noticed in the daily file well before our summer recess began. So everybody had ample time to weigh in and raise issues, particularly when we're being asked by the Consumer Federation of California to punt and to quote, perhaps the Rules Committee can convene a special meeting in December when we are not in session. So that's a major ask. So if you could, both of you, address some of the concerns raised in the letter. Again, I'm not sure why the letter was so late, because many of the actions you took that they called into question were in July. So it seems like we could have got the letter before today. But the letter states that they need more time to identify whether these nominees will actively provide the leadership to change the course and restore confidence in the CPUC. So if you could respond to that a little bit, either in talking generally about what you have done. As the Pro Tem has said, culture shift clearly has to happen. Culture shift takes a minute. And you have a couple of factors working against you. Time, because the public is very impatient. When we read about governmental entities when we read about challenges confronting governmental entities and confidence is lost, we expect direct, swift, transparent, clear action to rebuild. And even then, I'm going to be a little suspect. So it's going to take, it's going to take time. But if you could talk to us from your perspective, what you feel you have done, because they state that it's not due to their policy differences, but they're concerned about basic moral leadership. It's a pretty strong words. So in that context, let's talk about your leadership, both of you, as president and as a member, to help restore confidence, and why we should take action today, as opposed to wait for when we are in recess to reconvene a hearing to hear you.
Well, I would say, I'll start out briefly, I would say that we have, through our committee structure, started the process of going through, as I was mentioning earlier, and looking at specific rule changes and interpretation changes we need to make. And as one critical example of that, I will point out the Commissioner Code of Conduct that we're working on, where we wrote out our collective understanding of not just what our legal responsibilities are, but what we think is appropriate behavior for a commissioner in many different aspects of how we do our work. And it has been posted on our website for several months, and our committee has looked at it a couple times. And the only reason why the full commission hasn't adopted it yet is because people keep asking to make sure we give them time to comment on it. And so we have we've distributed it widely, and we've gotten some feedback on it and a lot of interest in it, and we intend to adopt it within the next month or two. And all of the commissioners have had the opportunity, because we all attend all of these committee meetings. We've all had the opportunity to discuss it, and it's meant to be a clear statement of what we view as appropriate conduct for the commission. And that's just sort of one of the examples that I raised on my list of steps that we're taking that will make statements and move the culture in a way that we hope will be more beneficial. And President Picker, did you want to add anything?
I think about this a lot, and on one hand, I would like to be able to say, here's what we're going to do, and then just be able to tick that off so people can see it. But I worry that something this complicated, that it's better to be humble and to do as much as I can, knowing that we'll make mistakes rather than make empty gestures or empty promises. And so I've been careful to talk about the things that I believe we actually will be able to do, but to focus more on the doing of them. And a lot of them are just hard for people outside to see. So one of the agreements that we have amongst the commissioners is that I will share power. I get to pick the executive director, but I will share power with them if we do it in public, and they don't go around the executive director to try to give direction to the staff around the direction that we set as a body. That's a very hard thing to proclaim. But it is the guts of us being an honorable, consistent organization that does our business in public. And so I think that it's incumbent on me to follow through and to not be arbitrary in any way ever, to be what I've said I should be, which is somebody who actually supports the commissioners and actually being an effective body. That's a hard thing to proclaim. You'll only see it as the commission starts to act as a body, and then people see us as consistent and fairly coherent in what we say and what we do, and so I think ultimately, given the amount of distrust, the only way I can see to do this is for people to see it, hear it, smell it, taste it, feel it, over time till it actually starts to be an assumption and they go back to forgetting about the CPUC. That will be my sign of trust.
And to that point, you've increased the frequency of meetings since you became president. So it creates opportunity for people to have more frequent engagement. And I appreciate your challenge, I think, and wanting to take action, and you can show me better than you can tell me. But I would just challenge you to think also about, I think it's also fair, because we've talked about the uniqueness of the body and how do we engage the public in advocacy, kind of tops and grassroots organizations in doing what you do. If an agenda, if a vision statement, if something can be laid out so people can at least have a guide, have a sense of the direction that you want to go, even to compare your actions against. You follow me? So I appreciate you not wanting to make proclamations about what you're going to do, but to give some sense of direction so people can understand that there is a commitment to a sea change.
Fair enough, but I will not be comfortable doing that until first the commissioners all believe that and articulate it. I don't want to be one speaking for all the commissioners. I want the commissioners to have a clear idea what it is we think we're doing and how we're doing it and why we stand by that, what their underlying values are that drive that. I want the staff to do that. A lot of the distrust comes from the fact that they heard the commissioners and the president especially saying one thing and staff saying another thing. So I have to win over that part of the public first, and we all need to believe it. We all need to do it. Then I think it's really fair to start to say that to the public. So that's my why I think about this a lot. I keep asking myself, should we actually start talking about that to large numbers of people, or is it just going to ring false?
Moving on to a second.
Ms. Mitchell, let me just add, I want to add something here. Ms. Mitchell, asked a question, and you didn't precisely answer the question, and I appreciate your thoughtfulness of your answer to it. I appreciate the thoughtfulness of your answer because I understand, based on Ms. Mitchell's question, that you want all the commissioners to buy in. Going back, we can change laws. We're lawmakers. We can change laws. Not everyone's going to follow what we do. They're going to either ignore the law, they're going to break the law. They don't have to actually follow the law. Culture is always much more challenging. With regards to the staff, you want folks to buy in, and that's absolutely critical. That's admirable. But also, just want to emphasize, based on Ms. Mitchell's question, which is a very important question, is the issue of leadership also, too. You have to exude that leadership. Of course, we want Ms. Randolph and others folks to buy into what you're saying. You want folks to follow, and not because you have a hammer or a stick. They do by fear, or it's a passive resistance that they sabotage. That's what folks do in institutions and bureaucracies. It doesn't matter if it's the PUC, the CEC, the California State Senate, the governor's office, Hewlett-Packard. Folks do this in institutions and organizations. It's a combination of wanting folks to buy in, at the same time demonstrating the leadership by taking folks, and sometimes folks don't want to go with you, but you're going to have to take folks with you. Come hollering or scratching. I just want to add that to Ms. Mitchell. I apologize for the intervention there. Well, not the intervention, but the
You were helping me. Thank you. Moving on to a second letter. I hope you've had the opportunity to see this, because this one is also dated August 19th, which is today. From the Utility Reform Network, TURN. This takes a little different strategy where the Consumer Federation said that they appreciate that they may differ with you on policy, but when to talk about leadership. This one seems to focus pretty specifically on policy. And the reason I raise it is really kind of because of the way it's structured in their approach, because they talked about expressing 3 expectations that they delineated as a part of their support of your confirmation as a commissioner, not as president, a year ago, almost exact to the date. And they were disappointed in these 3 areas: promoting rate design that rewards energy hogs, 2, promoting incentives for gas-fired technology, and thirdly, reversing commitment to inspect telephone infrastructure. I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond to those 3 expectations.
So I guess I disagree somewhat profoundly. The first one, it actually makes reference to our recent rate design decision. And I actually would have to say that this is an area where the process worked. I issued a decision. Another commissioner actually had a different vision. And so when I look back, it was pretty clear we'd heard from people across a whole year of conversation. And it was really coming down to the commissioners all read the same record, but we had some disagreements. So we spent time talking to each other in rate-setting deliberatives and in public about what the issues were. And we actually found an agreement. I don't think anybody was perfectly happy with it. You know, frankly, I don't think we don't get too many clean wins at the CPUC. But for me, I was very proud that we took the time to come together as commissioners and we got a unanimous vote on this. A lot of the discussion we had was whether our rate design actually promoted true energy efficiency. And the consensus was it probably wasn't the primary determinant. It was actually maybe secondary in some places, and we had lots of other tools where we needed, and places where we needed to think about this. So I'll just say that not only did I not agree with Turn's position on this, the other commissioners eventually found common ground and we agreed to proceed together. So the second one is increasing or promoting incentives for gas-fired technology. My reading of the bill is somewhat different than Turn's. I agree that we are really focused with a laser on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But here, the bill actually made reference to reliability, locational values within the grid, greenhouse gas emissions. And so when you look at fuel cells, which are a relatively clean technology, they do that. So the question is, should we make a decision based on technologies or qualities? Are we trying to also allow new technologies to find their feet in markets and constantly improve? I'll just point to the fact that while flat panel cell rooftop solar was really expensive, the prices have come down simply because we made space for them and actually pushed them, even though at the time they were pretty expensive. Now you can get at 100 megawatt and larger increments solar that is as cheap as new gas and new coal plants. So I think that we have to kind of balance all these things against each other. Having said that, and those are the policy choices that I think we're being asked to make there, we found some problems in the draft decision. Staff actually pointed them out and asked to delay it. So I don't think we're finished with this. And I haven't heard from the other commissioners yet either. So I think that it's an open book. But those are the issues that we're wrestling with. And I guess I just read the bill differently than Turn does. The last one is reversing the commitment to inspect the telephone infrastructure. This is another proceeding that I inherited after it was already 5 years old. And so I kept asking what we would find if we did the network examination. And given that when I got this proceeding middle of last year, that it was pretty clear that just the contracting would take another 6 to 9 months and the examination would take longer, I asked, well, what are we doing in the meantime to actually force improvements in quality? Because 2 years in the life of the landline telephone system probably means you lose another 10 to 15% of the customers to cell phones. I just said, we know they're failing to meet the standards, so why don't we just force the issue and get them to go out and improve it? Does our knowing the specific quality of infrastructure in any one place actually move this more quickly, get people better service now? So that's been my consideration. We actually talked about this at the commission meeting. There are now 2 commission proposals underway, And so we had a long discussion about it, and I think that this may or may not move to the same kind of a consensus building decision that we had at the rate structure. So I'd say it's an open book too, but that's my reasoning. I just was frustrated because I didn't want to wait another 2 years just to find out what we already know, which is that they're not meeting their metrics for providing quality of service. So that's my short answer.
I appreciate your response because I think it goes back to the issue raised by the other organization. There are policy agreements and there is expectations around leadership and how you guide and develop a process by which decisions can be made, and you can come back and explain them, justify them, so we all at least can follow the bouncing ball and understand the process that you all went through to make the decision. And I think as a member of Rules Committee, particularly in your role in leadership on the CPUC, it's important for us to understand and have a high level of confidence ourselves in terms of your commitment to a process that is above board, transparent, and open to the public. So I appreciate your response because that gives me some insight. My last point, Mr. Pro Tem, and it really piggybacks off of the issue Ms. Senator Fuller raised on behalf of Senator Fuller's letter to you. And that is, I'm also made aware about a letter that was sent to you by members of the legislature, chairmen, I believe all, yes, chairmen of several standing committees in the Assembly, the chairs of Natural Resources, Utilities and Commerce, and the Budget Subcommittee on Resources and Transportation. And again, I think it's really kind of a process issue. The letter reflects a disagreement on
I think
your decision with regard to really executing a piece of legislation, SB 861. So my question to you is have you responded? Because I hope that is not a trend where letters from members of the legislature are not prioritized and the lines of communication via letter or whatever the mode may be between the legislature and you as the chair of the PUC isn't prioritized.
After the staff pointed out the problems, I asked them to draft a letter, and I will. Oh, I'm sorry. After the letter, I went back to meet with staff. We had a discussion. That's when they decided and went back and looked and decided there were problems and postponed a action on the bill. It's actually similar to disappointment number 2 in Turn's letter. And so I asked them to draft a response. They did, in fact, give me a draft late last week, and I will apologize that I've been so busy preparing for this. I have not approved the draft yet.
Got it.
And it probably is a pattern that I am sometimes slow on things, and so my apologies.